Life.Church is one of the largest churches in the world, but they're also the pioneers of online church. You might have already known that. Here's what you probably didn't know. They started doing online church in 2006, and to make this happen, they had to build their own software from scratch. Today, it's called Church Online Platform, which they would eventually give away to churches for free starting in 2010. And today, they run their online church service 131 times throughout the week. Now, just recently on the Pro Church Tools show, we sat down with Christina Ross, Life.Church's online host team pastor, and she took us behind the scenes to show us some things about Life.Church that we had no idea about.
Okay, so this is gonna blow your mind.
My mind's already blown, so please continue. The full podcast is linked on the screen and in the description, but the conversation was so revealing to me that I needed to talk about it on the main channel here as well. Because irrespective of church size, location, or tradition, there's something for all of us to learn from Life.Church. So let's start with a bit of context. A Life.Church online service is about 1 hour long, a little bit more, pre-recorded message and worship. Runs for the first time each week starting on Saturdays and will replay, like I said, 131 times throughout the week, across all time zones, all the way through Friday, until the following Saturday when a new service kicks off and the cycle repeats itself. Now, depending on the day of the week you attend an online service, you might get a slightly different experience. If you attend on the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, the live chat feature will be turned on where you can chat publicly and see what others are saying. If you attend on a weekday, you'll see a button to chat, but those messages won't be displayed publicly. Either way though, whatever day of the week it is, on the other side of those messages, you'll be connecting with a Life.Church online host, of which there are more than 400. The craziest part? Most are volunteers, which I find incredibly encouraging because this means one of the largest, most influential churches in the world is entrusting their first impressions online to volunteers. And when I first heard that, I really needed to know more because when you have a team of that size, made up mostly of volunteers, you know what you need to make it all function? Systems. And we'll get to those in a moment because how Life.Church manages it all is fascinating. But if you're curious what a host actually is and what they even do, yeah, so was I. And so here's how Christina defined it.
So what we have our hosts do is one host is dedicated to just welcoming people. Just saying hello, asking people where they're coming from, responding to people that may be chatting in the public chat. What we also do is we create a script based on that first service, a script of, we'll know what worship songs there are. We'll have heard our senior pastor's message. And so we'll have a script for prompts that a host will then copy and paste into the chat.
Okay, so there it is. The first mention of a system. How do we prepare our volunteers to excel? We resource them. In this case, every week, Life.Church is empowering their host volunteers with a cheat sheet, essentially, of pre-written scripts that they can use in the chat that are specific to that unique service and its messaging. And this actually reminds me of positioning cards that they use in baseball. Basically, before every game, a group of coaches will prepare scouting reports on the opposing team that they condense into these little cue cards that each player gets when they're out in the field. And it tells them where to stand and what to expect when players on the opposing team are up to bat. And to continue the sports analogy, how do you become a host team volunteer to begin with at Life.Church? Tryouts, of course. Well, okay, no, not exactly, but there is a test.
They cannot pass into actually serving on a host team until they take that test. And the test, it's simple, but what we will ask them to do is actually respond to a few prayer requests. And they'll actually have to type into a field, and then that test gets submitted to a few of our admin team members, hosts, and then they'll evaluate it and they'll provide some feedback.
Now look, this is the kind of thing that I think smaller churches can learn from larger churches. Because yes, Christina manages close to 400 volunteers, so she needs systems in place to train and manage all of those people. But these techniques are just as viable in smaller ministries because you don't need to just throw someone into a new role and hope they can figure it out on the fly. That's a bad experience for the volunteer. They're not gonna feel confident, they're not gonna feel equipped, and if they don't know what's expected of them, it can be pretty uncomfortable trying to serve in a church where you don't have a target, where you don't understand the mission. The expression of that mission might look like pre-written scripts and practice tests, but it starts as something much larger.
One of the things I did is I kind of just rewrote our mission on Host Team. So it's to create an environment where we demonstrate the love of Jesus to our guests and lead them to become fully devoted followers of Christ. Dang it, I'm getting so emotional.
The scripts, the tests, the systems, what are they? They are frameworks that exist solely to fulfill the mission of the church. And you can see how passionate Christina gets about it because real people are at stake in all of this. And if there's one thing that impressed me more than anything else in our conversation with Christina, it was how she was both passionate and pragmatic. You can see her get emotional at the end of that clip because of how much she cares, and yet it's her pragmatic side that is implementing the systems to allow her team to serve people the best at scale. And at least in my experience, it's very difficult to balance those two tendencies. Typically you have the cold and calculated pragmatic personality, or you have the passionate yet chaotic personality. To have both coexist, in my view, is the makings of a very special leader, and it's one area where I personally have some massive growing to do. Now, a mission statement on its own admittedly can sound very corporate, right? The phrasing is usually very particular. So how do you make it vibrant and truly meaningful? You attach it to stories. And throughout our conversation, Christina would repeatedly drive home the lesson she was sharing with us by emphasizing it with a story of how it affected someone personally. And I know this was not an accident, okay? Storytelling is the most powerful form of human communication, and it's how we get our church and our volunteers to really grasp the mission because it allows us to see how it's actually working in the real world with real people.
I send videos every single week, kind of vision videos to, maybe share a story of what God is doing, or just to keep that personal feeling in front of them, because it can feel impersonal when, again, you're just seeing words, you're just seeing, the platform and usernames. And so it's important that I continue to push on that side of it so that I'm always reminding my volunteers, man, what they do makes a difference.
Now, I'll be honest here. One of the questions I really wanted to ask and have answered by Life.Church was, what are your expectations of host volunteers when it comes to things like tough theological questions? Because if you have volunteers on the front lines of online church, does that mean it's up to them to answer controversial questions as, representatives for the entire ministry? And unsurprisingly, Life.Church has a solution for this. Here's what Christina said.
When people are asking some of those heavy-hitting questions, I have no expectation that my hosts are fielding those. So one of the things we do have is we have this link to Calendly. And so we have a way for our guests to actually schedule a time to meet with a pastor. And so in fact, today, after I get off this call, I have, I think, 4 meet with the pastors. And so that's just randomly people across the world wanting to reach out because maybe they have tough questions or maybe they just need somebody to talk to.
Okay, let's get to the craziest part of our interview with Christina now. We were getting closer to the end of our time together, and she just decided to slip this revelatory comment in.
I don't think I mentioned this, but when people are searching for, they're struggling with anxiety or they're stressed or they're depressed, we will actually put ads in those spaces online that say, hey, it looks like you're having a hard time. Why don't you try church? So I think it's like 70 or 80% of the people that are actually coming to church are people that have clicked on our ads.
Here was my reaction.
80%? What?
It's insane.
As previously mentioned, Life.Church is one of the largest churches in the world. Their senior pastor, Craig Rochelle, is incredibly influential in his own right. The Christian subculture, at least in the West, is very celebrity driven. I don't know, label me a cynic. But my assumption was that for a large church like Life.Church, the majority of their views online were going to be coming from, other Christians, being drawn in by the affluent nature of the church and their senior pastor. To hear that the vast majority of their views are coming from ads as they go out into the lonely and dark places of the world and shine the light of Christ was not something I expected at all. Not because it wouldn't be effective, but simply due to the fact that I don't think Life.Church needs to do that. They would be perfectly fine riding the momentum of their influence in the Christian world, but this goes back to their mission. That's not their focus. If it's a byproduct of the work they do, great, but again, it's not the target. a lesson that is also instructive for churches of all sizes. If you want to watch our entire conversation with Christina, it's on YouTube, also on Spotify and Apple in podcast form. The Pro Church Tools Show drops new episodes every Wednesday. All links are in the description. And did you know, we've been doing this podcast for close to 10 years. Our episode with Life.Church was episode number 771, if you can believe it. And we'd love to have you follow along. We do have a YouTube channel dedicated to just the podcast, so check it out. And thanks as always for your time, attention, and trust. We'll talk soon.